Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Annual town meeting for the town of Shaftsbury. Pretty small crowd.
Must be the snow.
Which might be an indication that there's nothing controversial going on, which means I guess everybody's doing their job. Okay, I'd like to start out with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated.
Excuse me.
This is usually when I ask for a moment of silence, but I've had a couple of people suggest to me that maybe we should change it up. So instead of asking you to remember the folks that are unable to govern themselves as we are able to in this country, and remembering our troops that are overseas and the less fortunate people, what I would like to do is to recognize some different people in town. First, I want to introduce our select board. I have the chair, Tim Scoggins, Art Whitman, Tony Krulikowski. Are one of you guys vice chair?
Vice chair is Mitch. He's not here.
Okay. Mitchell Race, who's not here today, he's the vice chair. And Ken Harrington, he's also absent. Our town clerk's in the back, Judy Stratton. Our recording secretary over here is Richard Bump. I've noticed out in the audience some different folks. Our treasurer, Bill Fisk, is here. Town administrator, David Kiernan, right here. Zoning administrator, Shelley Stiles. I didn't see if Shelley was here. Okay, not here. I want to recognize, in lieu of the moment of silence, I'm going to name some folks. Our Developmental Review Board Chair, Tom Huncharik, and the members Michael Biddy, Michael Day, Megan Donkers, Chris Panesi, Dave Mance. Our Planning Commission Chair, Chris Williams, and his commissioners, Abigail Beck, Bill Pennebaker, and David Spur. The road foreman, Terry Stacy, and his road crew, Tim Green, Tim Gully, Ron Jennings, Steve Washburn, and Dave Worthington. Our Fire Chief, Joe Vatigan, and all of his volunteers, collectively. I won't try to name them. Our state representative, Alice Miller. And then, because I don't want to miss anybody, all of our listers, auditors, trustees, justices, appointees, and committee members. All of these folks collectively, some are paid positions, some allegedly are paid positions, like these guys. Regardless of whether they're paid positions or volunteer positions or half-paid positions, they're all responsible for making our town what it is. There are an awful lot of untold numbers of hours, volunteer hours, that people put in, and it's generally thankless. So what I would ask you all to do is I'd like you all to please stand up and let's have a resounding round of applause for all of our employees, excellent, volunteers, and everybody. Thank you. Please be seated. Okay, just housekeeping real briefly. We have fire exits. There's a fire exit here, out the back. In a crush, there's one right there. That'll go the rest of the housekeeping when we get to the point where we're going to do our voting. Tim, you have some special recognitions?
Yeah, I just unofficially didn't have anything really planned, but I just wanted to draw attention to our treasurer, Bill Fisk, who has chosen not to run for a second term, and say what a pleasure it's been to work with him and what a good feeling it has been for the town to have somebody with his many talents in that position. And he has really gotten our financial house in a really tight order, and it's, as chair of the select board, it's been a real comfort for me having him in that position, knowing that I didn't have to worry one bit about the essential financial doings of our town. And thank him for his service and say I'm sorry to see you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Moderator, I'd like to say a few words about, obviously, the biggest part of our town budget is the road maintenance. And of course, the biggest, and comes under the most scrutiny sometimes, and the biggest workforce that we have is the work crew, the road crew. But I think everybody knows it's been a tough winter, but do you realize that they've worked 7 weekends in a row without any time off? It's amazing. Terry, we thank you very much.
Thank you, Art. Okay, next, and I know a lot of you come just for this. Alice. Yes. There you are. In all seriousness, would you please come up and give us a legislative report? And I'm very glad that you've got the sense of humor.
Yes, I do. I better with you. Good evening, everybody. Good to see you all. I really want to thank the road crew, too, let me tell you. When I have to leave from Montpelier sometimes at 5:30 in the morning and see those roads plowed, boy, I could just hug them all. It's a wonderful job they do. So, I'd like to thank Ed Caldman, who passed away recently, and his family for the years of service that Ed served in the legislature. Remember to fill out the Doyle poll in the back. And remember to check off the resident or non-resident box when you fill out your income taxes this year. If you're a resident and you check off the wrong box, it's almost impossible to turn it around. So check that very carefully. You also, for those of you who receive financial help buying health insurance, you should have received tax form 1095-A for your federal return. If you have any problems with that, call this number, 1-855-899-9600. If you forget that, just call me at home or email me and I'll send it to you. We'll talk about the budget first, but this year I'm going to do things a little differently. I'm going to focus on health and education, which have been major issues in Montpelier this year and in our communities. There's a $118 million gap in our budget. It's going to mean there'll be consolidation of programs, difficult cuts across state government, efficiencies, restructuring parts of state government, and additional revenues will all be considered for careful review in balancing the fiscal year 2016 budget. You all hear me? The revenues and personal income especially have decreased. With budget pressures consistently growing at 5% and revenues growing more slowly at 2.5% to 3%, the legislature is working to bring long-term spending projections in line with long-term revenue forecasts. Healthcare. Even though Vermont Health Connect has been so disappointing and frustrating, more Vermonters are insured today than ever before. Since 2012, the numbers of people uninsured has been reduced by close to 1/2 from 6.8% to 3.7%. Almost all of Vermont's children are insured, and the Green Mountain Health Board has successfully reduced hospital price growth. Hospital budgets have only grown by about 3% over the past 2 years, compared to over 7% on average between 2003 and 2013. In addition, the board saved us about $7 million in private insurance premiums by reducing the requested rate increases from insurers. Education. I'm on the Education Committee now and working on education reform. Education spending and property taxes are the main issues facing Vermonters today. So I'm devoting, as I said, most of my talk today to what we have done in the Education Committee to tackle this problem. Some of it was very difficult for me to vote for, and some of it was not. Vermont faces a serious problem in student enrollment and the cost of education. The numbers of school-age children has decreased by 28,000 since I entered the legislature in 1997. And the projections are that enrollment will continue to decrease over the next few years. At the same time, our school expenses are increasing, resulting in higher property taxes. In addition, even though Vermont has the second lowest unemployment rate in the nation at 4.3%, the incomes of our working middle-class families are flat, making property taxes unaffordable for many. So, the Education Committee has done the following in an attempt to lower property taxes and continue to provide equity and a quality education for all of our children. The bill is H361, and you can read it on the internet. It creates larger districts, merging districts. Districts will have to have at least 1,100 pupils, so we're okay in Shaftsbury. We already have more than that. Pre-K to 12. And they'll merge with neighboring districts and share responsibilities. There'll be a temporary cap on local spending increases by 2% until 2019. We will restructure grants to small schools. Small schools presently receive about $7.6 million. Some of our small elementary schools around the state have 43 kids or less and 6 students per classroom. That's unaffordable. Currently, Vermont has the highest per pupil cost in the United States and the lowest student to staff ratio at 4.67 to 1. By simply increasing that ratio to 5 to 1, we would save Vermont taxpayers $73 million. The bill requires explicit ballot language so that you know how much you are spending per pupil, the overall budget amount, and the percent changes. And it'll be comparative from the year before. This is called accountability and transparency. We will shorten the tax protection period for districts with rapidly declining enrollment, otherwise known as phantom students. As an example, under the current system, if you had 100 students, lost 10, that's 10%. But the law says that you may only use 3.5% of your funding. So instead of budgeting for 90 students, you'll budget for 93.5 students, not the actual 90 students. This was done in the past to create a soft landing for schools whose enrollment was decreasing rapidly, and Shaftsbury Elementary School was one of them. But now I think we're okay here, and if you look at these charts, which are really, whoever did these charts did an excellent job, and our school board is doing a really good job of controlling costs. So a lot of what I'm telling you here today will not impact us as it will other towns and schools around the state. It requires the Secretary of Education to propose alternative methods of delivery and payment for special education services, a huge cost driver in education spending. It will limit out-of-state tuition payments to other states and countries, costing us millions and millions of dollars. Border states will continue to be funded because we do a lot of swapping with them. It requires the Secretary of Education to make recommendations about strikes, contracts, and binding interest arbitration. We will look at healthcare costs and another huge driver in increases in education spending, and consider shifting healthcare costs. According to the Joint Fiscal Office, the bill we introduced could save us up to $50 million and lower our property taxes. It has a long way to travel before it becomes law. Many changes will be made by other committees before it becomes law. So if you wanted me to keep you updated and posted on all the changes that will inevitably take place in this bill, put your email address on the Doyle poll, and I'll be sure to keep you informed. Thank you very much. I have to go to Sunderland right now. I've been invited to speak there. A little bit of Sunderland is part of our district, so I'm on my way there, and thank you. Was that 7 minutes?
10.
Oh, whoops.
That's okay. We're getting better.
You're getting better, I'm getting better every year. Thank you. Thank you, Tom.
you,
And
Alice.
thank you for all you do.
There's your connection with Montpelier. What's your email address?
amiller@leg.state. Let me do it. amiller@leg.state.bt.us or amiller@Sovereign.
Okay.
amiller@sovereign.net.
amiller@sover.net.
Yeah, that's easier, isn't it?
All right, okay. Your phone number's in the book?
Yes.
Okay, great. And I'm serious about that. You have questions or concerns about what's going on in Montpelier, start with Alice.
Let me give you another number. I have a cell phone now, finally. It's 430-1615. When I'm in Montpelier, I don't have this phone, so that's to get me. 430-1615.
Thank you, Alice. Tim, how about budget summary presentation?
How about that? Thank you, Tom. So I have thought I'd go through a budget presentation, talk about this year's budget, some of the things that are the same, some of the things that are different, and some of the things that you're going to be voting on tomorrow in addition to the budget tonight. To start off summarizing, and am I speaking into the mic well enough? No one's hearing. Okay, good. FY16 budget, I'm proud to say we were able to level fund the budget. It's just a hair less than the FY15 budget. Although we have also been able to squeeze it in places, thanks largely to the work of David Kiernan, and redirect spending to a few areas that we think will be more productive for the town. One thing that we're doing this year that our treasurer has been trying to get us to do since he has been in the job is make greater use of capital projects budgeting and reserve funds. And so this budget reflects that. And essentially what it means is a lot of items that are really one-time special things like buying a fire truck or building a sidewalk have been in the operating budget. And it's been confusing for us that our budgeting those things to deal with, because a lot of those special projects, especially construction type projects, happen during the summer, of course, and our fiscal year boundary is in the middle of the summer. And so it's always been kind of confusing to keep track of the budgeting of those projects across that boundary. So we've moved several things into capital projects budgets and to reserve funds. And in particular, there's some things like the Class 3 Roads Fund that we're asking you to vote on tomorrow that's real important, because it's $19,000 that used to be a line item in the budget for major repair work on the roads that we're now asking you to fund a reserve for. And we've actually increased that fund to $30,000. So that's what that item is that you'll see on the budget tomorrow. I'm also going to talk about some of the budget priorities that we have established to move funding around in the budget. I got ahead of myself and told you about the Class 3 Road Fund Reserve. Well, I'll cover that a little more. You may have heard in the paper that we're seeking voter approval to purchase a property on North Road that is close to the landfill. I'll talk more about that. You may also have heard about the Cold Spring Historic Site project that we have to create a historical marker at Coal Spring in South Shaftsbury. And then we'll have some status updates on a few items that you've probably been hearing about. David? Bottom line on the budget, as I say, is we managed to come in just a little under last year, so total expenses are down slightly. Last year we had built up a fund balance excess that was more than was required for contingency, and we used that in lieu of taxes. And so this year, in order to level fund the budget, it will require a 3-cent tax increase because we don't have that 3 cents worth of reserve fund to spend. And that happens because the way that works out is we have a grand list that has a value of approximately $400 million. And so a penny in the tax rate translates into about $40,000 in the budget. So that $120,000 of fund balance that we were able to use last year is 3 cents that we need this year to just to level fund the budget. Next. Capital projects, again, as Bill has been urging us to do for a while, to get capital projects out of the operating budget. The operating budget is best thought of as things that we do on a yearly basis, like how much oil does it take to heat a coal hall, or how much road salt do we need in a year. And then the capital projects, things like the sidewalk or the Coal Spring Historic Site thing, are construction projects that really should be thought of separately, and on Bill's advice, we're moving those in, we're spelling those out in the budget and moving them into reserve funds and funding them from reserve funds, so we can go into the construction season with a budget of so many dollars for the sidewalk, and it's there. We can see it in one spot. We don't have to think that we have half of that money in FY15 and half of that money in FY16 and try to do that juggling act in the budget accounting. And again, I've given examples of what that is. Class 3 road fund, Class 3 road reserve fund. We're asking voters to approve a request for $30,000 to be transferred to a Class 3 reserve road fund. Class 3 roads are mainly our gravel roads, and those are roads that we don't get state funding to maintain. We maintain those all ourselves. We have normally in the operating budget had $19,000 for major repairs to the road, laying fabric, that sort of thing. We've managed to, we want to increase that by $11,000 to $30,000 and put that into a reserve fund, and then we can use that money to attack the problem areas in the roads that seem to come up every spring during mud season. And it allows us to budget for those capital improvements separately from just the routine maintenance stuff that we do. And so tomorrow on the ballot, we're asking the voters to approve transferring that money to reserve. Any money that we put into reserves requires voters' approval. So in terms of priorities, roads are, of course, always our priority. In the spring, we will identify the major areas for improvement because things just seem to fall apart in different places every spring during mud season. We know we have a problem on Airport Road. We've had citizens call our attention to that. We're going to work real hard this year to address that. We've been offered from Peckham that they would help us with that because they're big users of that part of the road. It's at North Road where it splits and gets really wide. There where Trumbull Hill comes in. It's a real problem area. It's kind of low. A couple of suggestions have been made on that, but that's certainly one of the areas that we're going to address this year. Just to mention, you may have noticed that we're doing something a little different on the roads. Our foreman, Terry Stacy, has been communicating with other road foremen in the state, and in particular in Dorset. He found out that they have been using a little bit larger stones, like 3/8 to 1/2 inch stones on the road instead of salt and sand. And so we did some experience with that. It seemed to work well, and we're inclined to continue and do more of that. It has some advantages, one being that, as you know from last year, salt got really expensive with the bad winter last year. It got expensive when we were planning the winter this year. And with the stones, we don't have to use the salt to keep the sand from sticking together. And so far it seems to be working well. And it also, because the stones are a little larger, they stick up a little higher in, through the snow. And when the guys go through another time and plow after a small snowstorm, they pop right back out. They don't need to be reapplied every time like the sand does, which is pretty much a one-shot deal. We've known for a while we have a culvert in Shaftsbury Hollow that's nearing end of life. We've been looking at it. We've had engineering reports on it. We're seeking a state grant to address that. It'll be an expensive repair, but we're hoping to get the money to move forward with that. Coal hall repairs and maintenance. We've been saying for a number of years that we've got to do something about coal hall. It's been neglected. And this year we're going to do something about that. We've got money in reserve, and we're continuing to fund the coal hall reserve. But we have a long list of repairs and maintenance that needs to happen there. Howard Park repairs and maintenance. We have a $10,000 reserve, and we received a $10,000 grant, so we're planning to spend $20,000 on Howard Park this year. Our park supervisor and our park committee brought to our attention that things were falling behind there. The select board made a visit to Howard Park back in the early part of the summer, identified a long list of things that need to get fixed there, and we're going to tackle those this construction season. The sidewalk, we really think we're going to get the sidewalk done this year. It should have been done last year. It got bogged down in state paperwork again, and quite frankly, when we had the changeover of town administrator earlier in the season, when Margie left and David took over, when we were going through that flail, kind of got lost. We stopped beating on the state quite as much, but David is beating on the state regularly now, and we think we really will get a chance to move forward on that, and we're hoping to go to bids on that sidewalk project soon. The sidewalk project that I'm talking about is the curb wraparound there on at the intersection of Buck Hill Church and 7A, the part that wraps around where the auto repair place is. We've also, thanks to Karen Mellinger's work in getting those grants, we ended up with 2 grants and enough money to put in some safety stuff there, a sidewalk flasher and some other lights that will make that intersection a lot safer for our children and for all of our pedestrians who are going from the village to the school or to Howard Park. The garage, the select board still believes that the garage is a problem that needs to be solved. We would like to see the garage moved out of the downtown area. The building is inadequate and in poor repair. We know we've had that voted down a couple of times, but we're still exploring options there. So we're still thinking about that all the time, and if you watch the meetings, you know that it comes up all the time. We're asking the voters to approve a $40,000 purchase of a property on North Road. It's near the entrance to the transfer station. There are 2 small, very small residences, quarter-acre residences there that are really out of place. They were grandfathered in when that area became industrial. One of them is for sale. We believe that since it is for sale, we should act and incorporate that into our landfill property. Whatever use we make of our landfill property will be, it'll be more valuable if we have that incorporated into it. And also it's, we believe, prudent to buy that property to protect against the potential that there could be contamination from the landfill. There's no evidence that now that the landfill plume is moving, but there are For those two reasons, we believe that this is a good purchase for the town to make. If you go to the next slide, you can see, pull out my trusty lightsaber here. This is our landfill property here. This is the property where the garage was proposed to go at one time. This is all industrial, zoned industrial, although it's not colored purple on this map. And then there's this little property here and this little property here. And we think it would do the town well to incorporate those into the property that we own there. Cold Spring Historic Site Project. We're asking the voters to approve $10,000 in one-time funding to create a small historic park at the headwaters of Cold Spring, which is in South Shaftsbury on Horton Hill Road, almost where it turns into Cold Spring Road, and at where Coulter comes into it. We want to create a historical marker, a rest stop, and a drinking fountain there for people can stop, take in the history, and drink of the water that's there. We just found out Friday, we're happy to say, we received a $15,000 Vermont Arts Council grant to go toward this project. That grant was named Animating Infrastructure, and the point of that grant was to allow towns that are planning infrastructure projects to incorporate artwork into their projects and make them more attractive. And we hope to do that. Right now, a real rough guess of the total cost of the projects may be $55,000, and we will seek more grants to complete that funding. Cold Spring has been an important town water source for generations, and a number of residents still get their water from Cold Spring. And back in the day when Trenner Park built the Park McCullough House, what became the Park McCullough House in North Bennington, he wanted Cold Spring water. He had Cold Spring water piped from that spot in South Shaftsbury over a mile to the house, and it crosses over the brook created by Cold Spring via just a beautiful bridge, stone bridge there on Rollin Road. Next slide. The site right now is just a ditch, basically lined with concrete blocks. There's a little, you can't see it too well here, a little square cement frame there with some rock stuck into it that was an attempt to make it look nice at one time. But what we seek to do is to turn what is now just a ditch into a small historic park and that includes some artwork. I'm really excited to say that the artist that has been chosen for this project is Angus McCullough. He is a direct descendant of Trenner Park, who built the Park McCullough House and built the water system that travels from Cold Spring to Park McCullough House. And the money from the Vermont Art Council grant will go toward paying his art design fees and designing some sort of artwork to go into the site. We have a number of partners who have endorsed the project or are actively working on the site. The Park McCullough House Association, the North Bennington Water Department, the Bennington Bicycle Club. Matthew Perry at the Vermont Art Exchange is going to help us review the art design proposals that come from Angus. The landowners who own the property there at Cold Spring, Steve and Vera Hamilton, are on board with it, as are the Shaftsbury Historical Society and the Planning Commission. And then just in the way of updates on some things that have been happening for a while, the generator that the school board acquired for free by quick action from the middle school when it became surplus is now installed and online and ready to serve the town should we need to turn this building into an emergency shelter. We hope we never do, but if we do, we will be able to do that much better with a guaranteed source of power. And a lot of people deserve thanks for that. Jerry Madison, our emergency management coordinator, has been pushing on this when nobody else was was remembering that we needed to keep pushing on it. The Shaftsbury School Board, I thank them both for their quick action early on and also for prodding in recent months, offering to come up with half of the final funding that we needed to complete the installation. United Methodist Church donated $1,000 toward installing this generator, and we're thankful for that. And a number of local businesses, Peckham, Hewlett, Soretta, Jim Secor, Keith Kenyon, devoted in-kind labor and materials toward the initial installation of that. That took a while, didn't go exactly the way we planned. We, the Select Board, budgeted for half of that installation back when the generator became available. We had hoped to find grants to do the other half. We didn't find the other half. The project stalled. Finally, as I say, with push from a couple of areas, we got it done, and it's installed and working. I indicated the sidewalk fund the sidewalk had suffered from permitting delays. We think those permitting delays are under control. At least we've identified where they are. We're pushing on that, and we hope to complete that project this summer and go to bids on it any minute now. And as I say, the garage is always a front burner issue for this Select Board. We continue to think about ways that we can complete this project in a way that's acceptable to the entire community. One of the things we've been looking at, if you've, as you know, if you've been listening to us or watching us on TV, is we've been looking at other sites. One of the things that I did early on, and you may have seen in a recent Select Board meeting, when the second vote went down, a lot of us were thinking it went down due to cost. I looked at some of the initial engineering estimates in terms of the different parts of it per square feet, and put it in a spreadsheet so that we could look at, how small can we go? Can we make a cheaper garage? Can we go we went from 8 bays to 6 bays. Does it make sense to go down to 4 or 3? And after looking at it at the Select Board the other night, to a rough estimate, and again, deciding finally would require new engineering estimates, but it doesn't look like it makes sense to go much cheaper than $1 million in building a garage. And the $1 million estimate that we're looking at is something close to what we had proposed before, or perhaps it's been suggested maybe a 4-bay garage and a maintenance bay instead of a 6-bay garage, because the crew spends so much, does do all of their own repair work, that it makes sense to have a repair bay. The next decision point on the garage is going to be next March. There's no election in November, so we were not going to try to act on that before then. We are continuing to put $75,000 a year into the garage reserve fund. That was the money that would have gone into a loan payment for the garage. And we decided last year, and we continued that practice this year, of putting that money aside. If we continue to do that for a third year, by the time we get to the middle, or by the time we get halfway through this year, we'll be looking at a reserve of $225,000 to reduce the cost of that garage. And that's what I have. Are there any questions? Oliver.
I guess my question is on the sidewalk project.
Oh, yeah. Would you go to the microphone, because otherwise the people at home will not be able to hear you.
I guess my question is about the sidewalk project. You're moving along on that. Hopefully we get construction started this summer. Is the design of that available for public inspection? And are you going to have any public comment period on the design? What I fear, with the state's help, is winding up with something like they have in North Bennington. And we don't want anything like that. And the second comment that I would like to, I realize too late to incorporate in the design at this point. It's already been addressed. But we really need to get Alice and our other state representatives to work on DOT about getting a full stoplight down here at the corner to alleviate the traffic flow from the school. Even if we only use it for emergency use by the fire department, and during those times when traffic is heavy coming in and out of the school, we really need to have a full-blown stoplight there. That's my personal feeling, and just wanted to make that comment. But I do think we need to have a chance to look at the design of this thing. Nobody's seen a picture of what they're working on yet, and to have it done, let's say you start in July, you really don't have a lot of time unless we get a chance to look at it and render comments if you'll accept them. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, those are certainly public record. They're available. We do not have plans to make any further public meetings about the sidewalk plan. I know it was discussed in the select board, probably been 2 years now when they were in the design phase of that. The design has been done and it's been waiting on state permits for over a year. But certainly if you would like to inspect those documents, you're welcome to. As far as the stoplight, this town argued for a stoplight every 7 or 10 years for several decades. The last time was around 2010, and we were turned down again for a stoplight, and that's when we went to Plan B and lowered the speed limit out there. So I hear what you're saying. Everybody in this town wants a stoplight. I don't think we're ever going to get one, and I'm not inclined to fight for it anymore because I know where the state stands on it. It's just not enough traffic to warrant it, according to the state. Carl Corman.
Tim, one of the justifications for purchasing the property next to the landfill was minimizing liability. Do we not have insurance that would cover us for liability if we had an issue there?
We do not.
No.
Our insurance specifically does not cover that, and I don't think you would be able to get insurance to cover that because the potential liability could be so huge.
And secondly, since the garage is a necessity and the 2 land purchases that are being proposed are, in my mind, somewhat niceties, costing the town a lot of money, what is the really persuasive factor for incurring that kind of cost for properties when we know we're going to have up to $1 million worth of expense for the town within the very foreseeable future?
Well, Art, go ahead.
One of the possibilities is that the garage could be positioned in the area where one of those houses is being bought and the other house could be for sale at some point. And by moving the landfill station, the transfer station, moving that because the garbage collecting process is changing completely, again, by a state mandate, we may come up with a fairly nice plot of land that would be a great spot for the garage without being down in the hole where it was proposed in the past.
Don't we already have that piece of property down there already that you just described as being in a hole?
Yes.
And I don't recall that there was much pushback from the location of that property in that so-called hole, but it was more whether or not it should be located that far away from Coal Hole. So wouldn't that issue that was a concern to the town still exist after we spent this money?
Part of the budget for building the garage in that area was a $70,000 roadway to go down into it. We would alleviate that by having it up on a higher ground.
So you're saying it would be a net, if that were to happen, it would be a net increase, a net savings?
Yes.
Would be essentially neutral. I, for one, have heard a lot of people complain that they didn't like that site, that they didn't want to build $1 million building that they couldn't see. That was one of the reasons that they didn't like that. And Carl, I don't agree with your premise that because we need to build a $1 million garage, we can't spend money on anything else. And I think when opportunities like this, the chance to buy a piece of property that's that's really surrounded by our property, and we have good reasons for buying it, I think we still have reasons for we should still do that.
No, I agree with you, that if, my only question is, what is the clear and convincing argument for these two pieces of properties, as opposed to, we have this hunk here, it'd be nice to add this, and the other property that's going to be purchased would be, it's not a necessity, it's a nice perk, that's all.
I agree. It's not a necessity, but I stand by the reasons that for buying it, that it makes our property more valuable and it protects us from liability. Any other comments? All right, I will return control to our moderator.
Thank you, Tim. Okay. Now we're going to get to the meat of the meeting, so to speak, where we'll take our legislative actions. I hope when you folks come in, you all picked up one of these, or brought the one with you that was mailed to you. We're going to take up our town meeting questions and articles. Usually, it starts off with me. It used to start off with me reading the warning, been a lot of years, but usually somebody makes a motion. Joyce?
I'll make that motion to waive the reading to accept these reports.
So a motion's been made and seconded that we waive the reading of the warning, which is on pages 14, 15, and 16 of your town report. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. So we're going to get to the first article, but before we do that, a little bit of housekeeping, and I was off the mark. I usually do this in the beginning. Address your questions to me. Raise your hand. I'll recognize you. When you speak, please use the microphones. Are we live?
Yes.
Okay, we're live, so the folks at home in all the other towns, but mainly we're concerned about the town of Shaftsbury, they need to hear what your questions are, and the only way they're going to do that is through the microphones. Please give your name for the record when you're recognized and when you speak. I'll call for voice votes. Non-residents, I don't know if there's any sitting out here, you can't vote. And I always say, the non-residents, you're next to a resident, and if you do vote, you'll get jabbed in the ribs with an elbow by a resident. I don't think there's any non-residents here, so we don't need to worry about that. When we take up the articles, I'm going to ask for, before there's any discussion on an article, I'm going to read the article, I'm going to ask for a motion and a second. Once I have that, then we'll discuss the article, debate the article. You can amend an article once, you can amend the amendment once. Each one of those amendments has to have a second. You can't amend beyond a second amendment, and then we work backwards till we get to the main article and vote. So the first article is to hear the reports of the town officers and take action thereon. The reports are presented here. This is a funny article. I take a motion that we hear them and accept them.
Make a motion to accept the reports as printed.
Motion's been made that we accept them as printed. Do I have a second? I have a second. This is when you can ask about the reports, offer corrections to the town report. There being none, are you ready to vote on it? All those in favor of hearing the reports and accepting them as presented in our town report, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Article 2, to determine shall the select board members each receive an annual stipend of $500? Shall the town treasurer receive an annual stipend of $16,000? Shall the town clerk receive an annual stipend of $8,000? Shall the Board of Auditors be paid a wage at the rate of $10 per hour? Shall the first and second constable be paid a wage at the rate of $10 per hour? Shall the Board of Listers be paid a wage at the rate of $10 per hour? We can take these up individually, or we can vote on the article on all of them as a single article. Joyce?
I'll make a motion to accept A through F.
Motion's been made that we accept A through F. Do I have a second? Second. Second's been made. Any discussion or questions? Informationally, I looked. This is the same as last year. There's no change, no increase, no decrease. All those in favor of approving Article 2 regarding the salaries, wages, and stipends to be paid, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Article 3, shall the town authorize collection of taxes on real or personal property by its treasurer, which are due in hand on or before Tuesday, November 10th, 2015 at 5 p.m., or likewise postmarked no later than Tuesday, November 10th, 2015. I need a motion. Motion's been made. Do I have a second? Second. And a second. I'm going to paraphrase. So what we're talking about is having our taxes be due Tuesday, November 10th by 5 p.m. or postmarked no later than Tuesday, November 10th, 2015. Any questions, comments, concerns? All those in favor of having the town authorize collection of taxes on real or personal property by its treasurer, which are due in hand on or before Tuesday, November 10th, 2015 at 5 p.m., or likewise postmarked no later than Tuesday, November 10th, 2015, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it, so ordered. Article 4, shall the Select Board be authorized to borrow money from time to time as needed in anticipation of taxes? I need a motion. Motion's made. I need a second. And I have a second. Any questions or discussion? All in favor of authorizing the Select Board to borrow money from time to time as needed in anticipation of taxes, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it, and it is so ordered. Okay, we have two articles left to be transacted tonight. Article 6, which is other business, and Article 5, which is our budget. Shall the town appropriate the sum of $1,970,092 to defray the town's general and highway expenses for fiscal year 2016, the amount of such sum to be raised by property taxes and to be reduced by non-tax revenues and reserve funds? I need a motion to that effect, please. So moved. I have a motion. Is there a second? Second. And I have a second. If you look in your annual report, pages 47 through 63 is the presentation of the budget. 64 and 65, 66 are the budget notes. So 47 to 66 is what we're voting on. Are there any questions? Any comments or concerns? Guess you guys are doing a good job.
You're happy, get on with it.
Are you ready to vote? All those in favor of approving our fiscal year 2015-2016 budget as presented, pages 47 through 66 in our annual town report, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it, and it is so ordered. So now we get to our last one. To transact any other non-binding business as legally may come before said meeting at this time. This is, any motions that are made, any action that is taken is non-binding. It's a good time for informational business to be transacted, but before we get to that, I want to point out on pages, what we're acting on tonight is on page 14. That's our floor meeting. Tomorrow, the Australian ballot in the at the firehouse from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. is Articles 7, 8, 9, and 10. And those are on pages 15 and 16. And please do make sure that you vote. So, Article 6. Anybody have any comments or anything they want to relate? Joyce? Yeah, to a microphone, please.
Oh, I'm bringing thanks from the Bennington County Coalition for the Homeless. They're thanking you for your support, and they're asking for the same amount of money this year as they did last year, and they're asking for your support again. So they're saying thank you.
So that's what's voted on. You said the Bennington Coalition for the Homeless? Okay, so they're asking for $750, and that's voted on tomorrow by Australian budget. Some other comments?
Tom, I do have more. Go ahead.
Okay, hold on. Yes?
Hi, I'm Nathan Johnson. I'm just looking through the report. You notice that Cole Hall needs repairs because of neglect. You notice Howard Park needs repairs because of neglect. You know, Garage needs repairs from neglect. I'm just wondering, as you know, these are all important things that we need to fix, and it's hard to project in the future what other select boards will do. Is there any provisions or talks about how we can maintain those so they don't all come due at the same time as we are? Yeah.
Somebody?
You know, like, I mean, is there thought when we're talking about this, how are we going to maintain them so they don't all fall into disrepair as quickly? I'm not sure if I'm making myself clear.
Yeah, I guess I would say that's normally how it's done. Things don't all break at once. But the reason that these things kind of piled up is that we went through some really rough economic times back in 2008 to 2010, and the select board at the time really cut back on stuff like that to try and avoid raising taxes when people were hurting so much. And so some of these things have started to pile up. And so now we're just having to deal with them. I would say that things like Howard Park, we did seek grants for that, and we're funding it out of reserve funds. And the Cole Hall, we're funding it largely out of reserve funds. But I guess the real question is, do we have a plan to, like a long-term maintenance plan for that? No, we don't. We probably should, but we tend to address things as they come up by and large.
All right, I just would encourage you to kind of think ahead a little bit. But thanks.
Yep, you're right.
Thank you. Barry?
Barry Mayer. I was involved with the garage investigation last time around, and we visited Swanton, and they managed to build a very nice facility there without costing the taxpayers any money. Well, Swanton isn't Shaftsbury. I should say Shaftsbury isn't Swanton, but what they did was they put away money in advance. And I realize that this budget is as tight as it can get. But I'm just suggesting that the next time the voters are approached with the idea of spending $1 million, it might feel better if they knew that there was some funding ongoing, however little it might be. Token, you might say, but still some idea that and that would sort of reflect back on the last speaker's comments as well. I don't see any way that you can level fund the budget and add that in there, but it ought to be something I think the select board thinks about.
Well, we are doing that. We do, we started, the year that the garage vote failed, we started putting away what would have been a payment on the garage into a reserve fund, and we've done that every year since. So when the garage comes up, it won't be $1 million. It'll be $1 million minus whatever that reserve fund is. And as I said a minute ago, if we aimed for the second half of 16, or at least, started it so that we included the funding from the second half of 16, that number's would be up to $225,000.
Another thing that we have done is that in a couple of years, some of the payments, when we bought pieces of equipment, we leased them as opposed to paying for them outright. Once we get some of those payments under our belt, we are setting money aside for graders, dump trucks, that sort of stuff, so that there isn't that shock when you have to get it all at once.
Art, for tomorrow, Article 9, Sub 6, is asking the town to appropriate $75,000 to the garage reserve fund. Is that, in effect, what we're being asked to do, is what Barry's asking?
Yes.
Okay. Is the current balance, did I see $225,000?
No, that
No.
would be the balance by the time we had a chance to take action on the garage again.
Okay, so this would be the first time? Second time?
Second time.
Okay. Yes, Chris.
Chris Williams. I'd like to talk to you about zoning bylaws that are on tomorrow's Australian ballot.
I actually, Chris, if I could interrupt, I have more presentation to go into about the zoning
I hadn't seen
bylaws.
it, so I was going to fill in. You do
Yeah,
it.
I'm planning to call on you when we get to that point.
Mr. Moderator, I think it's important that Article 9, all the things listed in Article 9 are already in the budget, so that when somebody votes for these, they are not increasing the budget. I didn't realize that until Mr. Fisk explained that to us, that these numbers are already in the budget.
Okay.
Yeah, the community appropriations, we budget assuming that they will all be approved by the voters.
That bears some thought. That's interesting, Art. I'm not going to go any further.
Okay. I just didn't want people to think that by voting yes for them, they're increasing what they already voted on previously at the floor meeting.
David?
Can you please clarify that, please? Because I'm confused.
The voters are,
That you just talked about is in the budget?
David, you got to come up to a microphone, please. There you go,
David
sorry.
Spur, and I'd like you to clarify what you just said about Article 9.
let me make sure I'm looking at it. It's the community appropriations, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, the community appropriations are where various organizations, charitable organizations, ask to be placed on the ballot to receive money from the town.
Excuse me, Tim. Are we talking about Article 9 or 10?
9.
Article 9. Okay, that's not the community appropriation.
No, sorry, 10. 10.
David, were you asking about 9 or 10, or both?
I think what he's looking for is, Art was referring to, I thought, Article 9, but were you referring to Article 10?
9 and 10.
9 and 10.
You made a statement a moment ago about 9 and 10, and it may not have been clear before, but it's definitely not clear now.
Okay.
Okay.
So I'm trying to understand, have we already, by voting on the budget of $1 million, said yes to this in effect?
In effect, yes. The budget that we put forward to you assumes that the voters will approve everything in Articles 9 and 10. If the voters don't approve everything in Articles 9 or 10, That will be money that we do not spend of that $1.9 million that we're asking for.
Based on A, B, C, or 1, 2, 3 that we don't vote for. Okay.
Correct.
That's right, and anything that is not voted is money that is not spent.
Yeah, it goes into the fund balance.
So there's no surprises.
That's right.
Right.
It's interesting. Terry?
I'd just like to make a statement. My name's Terry Stacy, road foreman. Gentleman's comments here about the garage. The garage is 50 years old. We have updated all the wiring in it. The interior is fairly decent for working capacity for 50 years. It's the heat loss in the structure now that we're concerned with. It's not, everything is up to date in the garage. It's past OSHA, but the heat loss is astronomical. I'm just letting you know that. And going back further than this, select board, I think questions on Cole Hall from in the past, all the repairs that they've approached to do to the building has been a very astronomical cost to do it, and I think that's why they kept tabling it to do it. And because when they do venture into it, I think Dave's looked into a little bit more, it's going to be a pretty substantial cost to insulate the building and put the proper lighting and everything into it.
Anybody else? You want to do more presentation?
Yeah, I have more to say about this stuff that's... I have some more to say about the things that are going to be on the ballot tomorrow. There are a number of zoning issues, and then I believe the other are things that we've already covered. But just to read the first zoning law that's coming up, and I should point out, and Chris will point out too, that these zoning laws, the Planning Commission has been working on for some of them for quite a while, and they are the Planning Commission, they represent the Planning Commission doing their job of implementing the town plan. And so the Select Board has reviewed these, we support these, and we urge the voters to approve these zoning bylaws that we're suggesting. The first one, Shaftsbury and Granger Hollow, shall the voters approve a change to the zoning district map involving lands along the northern ends of Shaftsbury Hollow Road and Granger Hollow Road. The change would move southern boundary of the Forest and Recreation District northward to the 1,400-foot elevation contour in two places. Zoning in these areas would change from Forest and Rec to Rural Residential 200 with a minimum lot size of 5 acres. If you want to go ahead and go to the next slide, I believe it's the map, and it points to the two areas that are being changed. Back in the day, the zoning followed the 1,400-foot contour, and Chris is going to correct me if I get this wrong in terms of the history, but then at one point, a decade or so ago, Forest and Rec followed the 1,400-foot contour to here and then went along property boundaries along here. And it sat like that for a while, and then some people in these areas where it had changed woke up one day and said, oh my, I'm not in rural residential or a place where I can have a septic, I'm in Forest and Rec. Those landowners have been lobbying for this change for a while. The Planning Commission has reviewed what they have been asking for and has agreed that it makes sense to go ahead and move these areas into a rural residential category, in this case with a minimum lot size of 5 acres. Chris, did you have more you wanted to say? Okay. Any questions about that? That's one of the zoning laws we're talking about. Also, on home occupation, shall the voters approve a change to the zoning bylaws involving home occupations? The change affirms home occupations as a conditional use and define limits on the building area that may be associated with home occupations. This is just to better define what defines a home occupation. There is a point when a home business becomes a business if it grows too big, and that's what we want to happen. We want people to be free to, start something in their house and grow it. But if it grows too big, we have to respect the zoning laws and the neighbors. And this would better define at what point we believe a home business is no longer a home business and needs to be in a commercial district, commercial zoning. And if you have questions about the details of what's involved there, Chris can address those for you. Any questions? All right, number 3, multifamily housing. Shall the voters approve a change to the zoning bylaws that allows only 1 or 2 family dwellings in rural residential districts and allows single and multifamily dwellings in village residential districts? Currently, we allow multifamily housing in rural residential, but not in the village center. Planning Commission and the Select Board believe that's not the way it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be the other way. We concentrate the development in our areas of high density. This corrects that and allows multifamily housing in the village residential area. And fourth one, subdivision regulations. Shall the voters approve changes to the zoning bylaws involving subdivision regulations, Appendix C? The changes increase incentives for developers to cluster development while preserving open spaces and correct several minor inconsistencies. We have rules in our zoning bylaws that encourage developers to, when they develop a piece of land, to cluster the development, the building of houses, for example, in a small area and leave more open space in terms of park and open land open, rather than spacing the houses out 5 acres each. The incentives in the zoning bylaws encourage that. The Planning Commission looked at those kinds of laws in other communities. Other communities have them. No one's ever taken advantage of the zoning laws that we have to encourage that. This change would bring our rules more in line with the incentives that are in other areas, and perhaps someone will take advantage of that. Questions? Okay. The other things that are on the ballot tomorrow, we've already talked about the Class 3 Roads Reserve Fund. That 21 should be at 19,000, was previously in the operating budget. We've increased that by 11,000, and we're asking the voters to let us put 30,000 into a reserve fund that we will use to fund major road repairs during the summer. The North Road property purchase we've talked about, and the Coal Spring Historic Site project we've also talked about. We're requesting voters to allow us to put money in reserve for each of those, and that's on the ballot tomorrow. Any questions? Joyce?
Regarding, going back, I didn't ask the question back then, but under multifamily, are the setbacks going to be the same for a single family or for a multifamily as it is for a single family? Is that changing, or are you just using single family?
I have to defer to our planning commissioner on that one.
The setbacks stay the same?
The setbacks are the same throughout the district regardless of what type of housing you're
Okay.
building.
Thank you.
Mike Foley in the back, could you come up to a microphone?
I think I missed my chance too. I was wondering about the wording for the bylaw changes under 7D, where it says the changes increase incentives for developers to cluster development. What does that mean, increase incentives?
Chris, again, I'll defer to you for details on the bylaws.
Chris, could you come up to a microphone? I can. I know you've got a loud voice, but...
No, I don't have to use it now. The incentive is presently a 15% density bonus. That means that if you were, let's see if I can do the arithmetic here, if you're going to build 7 structures, 15% would just about give you an 8th one. So that we see this as a desirable form of development, You can see it as you drive around the state in a lot of communities, and the incentive has been raised in this proposal from 15% bonus to 20% bonus. Does that answer your question?
As it stands now, when you say we see it across is there an example around here that we could look at and see what that writing would actually mean? Or what development around here that we could look at and say, that's what 7D means? Anything between like Manchester or?
I really don't know which developments have taken advantage of this kind of incentive. It's outside of my town, I don't know the details. So, no, I can't help you there.
So Chris, the goal of this generally, correct me if I'm wrong, would be if somebody, instead of putting 7 houses on 7 individual lots, if you clustered them closer together and hence left more open area, you might qualify to put an 8th unit in there. Is that right?
That's the sense of the thing, Tom.
Okay. And that's the hope being that it will encourage more open land and closer clustering, so maybe more efficient use of resources?
Right. That your development infrastructure, your roads, your sewers, water lines, electricity, telecommunications, you're serving a much smaller area. So yes, there's definitely an efficiency here.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Back to you, Tom.
So we're still under other business. Any other questions or comments?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion's been made to adjourn. Is there a second? There's a second. It's not debatable. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you all for coming. See you next year.
Thank you, Tom.
Good job. Good job.
Did that come out all right?